A lonely Comanche woman found an 18-year-old boy tied to a fence and gave him a name and a place to belong. He was tied with barbed wire, arms stretched back like a broken scarecrow, face split open with dried blood. No shoes, no name, just breathing, barely. The coyotes hadn't touched him yet, but the buzzards were circling low. 3 of them already sat on the fence post above his head, as if taking bets on how long he'd last. She found him on the 2nd day of spring. The woman rode slow, as always, her pony half limp from age, a bow across her back not drawn in years. Her braids were thin and her shoulders wide. Alone long enough for people to call her strange, or dangerous, or forgotten. Her name was Toma, and she did not stop for most things. But when she saw the boy on that fence, arms trembling, eyes slitted open just enough to see the sky, something inside her made her dismount before thinking. No one had come for him. Not yet. She loosened the wire with a careful hand, slow enough not to break skin further, fast enough to keep the buzzards wary. He didn't speak, didn't flinch, but when she cupped the back of his head and pressed water to his lips, his mouth moved. One word, too hoarse to hear. She leaned closer. What? He swallowed. Tried again. Nothing. So she spoke instead. You're not dead, she said in Comanche, which means you're still meant to be something. But to understand why she said that and why she meant it, you'd have to know the kind of life Toma had lived. 27 winters had passed since the last of her family was driven from the plains. She remembered smoke. She remembered the cold bodies of her sisters, arms around each other like they could keep warm in death. She remembered dragging herself across the prairie on bleeding feet, chased by dogs with steel jaws and men who didn't ask names before shooting. Since then, she'd lived quiet, alone, in the hills west of San Saba, where the grass grew tall and the trees didn't whisper things she didn't want to hear. Some in town called her a witch. Others just said she was waiting to die. They weren't entirely wrong. She spoke to no one, traded hides for cornmeal and tobacco once a month, lit fires only when she had to. She wasn't looking to save anything, especially not a white boy tied to a rancher's fence like an offering. But something in his eyes, the way they barely focused, like he wasn't even sure he wanted to be saved, twisted something in her chest that hadn't moved in years. So she carried him, over her shoulder like a sack of kindling, back to her hut at the edge of the creek where the water always ran cold. She didn't expect him to live, but she built the fire anyway, boiled herbs, washed the dried blood from his chest and arms and face. When she cut away the shirt, she saw the scars beneath the bruises. Old ones, raised, thin, the kind of marks left behind by belts and whips and shackles. This boy hadn't just been punished. He'd been trained to suffer. She wiped the dirt from his throat, laid a deer hide over his shivering body, then sat back, waited, and just before dawn, when the fire dipped low and the coyotes had stopped howling, the boy opened his eyes again and whispered, "Am I dead?" Toma didn't answer right away. She stood, poured water into a carved wooden bowl, handed it to him without a word. He drank, coughed, looked around, dazed. "You're not dead," she said again, this time in English. "Why'd you help me?" he rasped. She stared at him for a long while, then simply said, "Because you looked like you didn't care if I did or not." He couldn't stand on his own for 2 days. Toma fed him from a horn spoon, broth first, then soaked bread. She cleaned his wounds with river water and yarrow. When he vomited, she held his head. When he cried in his sleep, she said nothing. The 3rd night, by firelight, he asked, "Why'd they leave me?" She didn't answer, because she already knew the answer and because he already did too. On the 5th day, he tried to stand. Legs buckled. He cursed under his breath, but not at her. "I'm not weak," he muttered. "Then stop proving you are," she said calmly. He blinked. "Is that what you think? I think your body was broken, but your spirit's still listening." He didn't know how to answer that. Didn't know how to look at her either. This woman with dark braids and sharper eyes than any preacher he'd ever met. "I don't have a name," he said finally. She turned to him. "Everyone had a name once. My folks called me boy. The ranchers called me half-breed. My master called me—" He stopped, looked away. Toma didn't press. She simply said, "You were born. You lived. You bled. So you deserve a name." He looked up at her. "You gonna give me one?" She shook her head. "No. But if you earn it, I'll tell you when I hear it." By the 7th day, he was helping gather wood. By the 9th, he could draw water from the creek without stumbling. And by the 10th, he started asking questions. About the land. About the way her fire pit was shaped. About why she talked to birds. "You don't have to believe everything," she said one morning. "But it helps if you listen like you might." He grinned at that. The first real smile she'd seen from him. Not smug. Not boyish. Just human. Then came the knock. If you could call it that. A man's boot, slamming against the hut door. 3 times. Boom, boom, boom. Toma didn't move. The boy froze, eyes wide. "What is it?" he whispered. "Old noise," she said softly. She stepped outside. There were 2 of them. One on horseback holding a double barrel. The other dismounted, wide face, red beard, boots too clean. "You're her?" the bearded one asked. Toma didn't answer. He spit on the ground. "That boy inside. He's not yours." "I didn't say he was." "Well, he ain't anybody's no more. That's what the wire was for. Shoulda left him." The man on horseback chuckled. "You took in a rabid dog, Comanche." Toma's face stayed unreadable. "I've seen rabid dogs. They foam. They bite. He just breathes." "He stole from us?" the bearded one snapped. "Ran off with a horse, a bottle, and a bad attitude." "Then you should have killed him clean," she said. "We tried. Didn't finish the job. Didn't plan on some squaw pulling him out the dirt." The man raised his gun slightly, not aimed yet, but enough to change the wind. Inside the hut, the boy stood behind the door, fists clenched. He was shaking, but not from fear, from something else. Something old and hot and rising. Toma looked at the man, her voice even. "No one owns him now. He's not yours to keep. He wasn't yours to break." The man stepped forward. "This ain't a tribal court, lady. Ain't a war camp. It's Texas. And in Texas, harboring a thief means hanging with him." Then a new voice came, low, fierce, from the doorway. "If you touch her, I'll gut you where you stand." Both men turned. The boy stood there, shaking, but holding Toma's old blade in both hands. Eyes full of something neither of them expected. Not courage, not rage, but purpose. "You think I don't remember the nights you tied me up out back?" he said to the bearded man. "You think I don't remember what your boots felt like on my ribs?" The man took a step forward. Toma raised her hand. "Try it," she said. "Please." The man hesitated. The one on horseback shifted nervously. Finally, the red-bearded man spat again. "Keep him. We'll say the coyotes took him after all." They turned, rode off slow, but not weak. They knew what they'd seen, and they didn't want to fight it. Not today. When they were gone, the boy dropped the blade, collapsed against the doorframe, breathing hard. Toma knelt beside him. "You were going to fight them. I would have died." "Yes. You let me do it anyway." She nodded. "You didn't need me to save you. You needed to decide you were worth saving." He looked at her, tears in his eyes. "I think I want a name now." She looked him over, long, silent, then said, "Not yet." 3 weeks passed. The boy mended. His muscles hardened, scars faded to soft pink, and his eyes no longer darted at the sound of branches breaking. He hunted rabbits, learned to gut fish without gagging. Once, he even caught a crow in a snare and released it just to prove he could. Toma watched him without praise, not because she wasn't proud, but because she knew pride could make a person careless. And he wasn't ready for that. Still, in the evenings, he'd sit beside her fire with dirt on his knees and ash on his shirt, asking questions like a child who didn't know what he wasn't supposed to know. "What do Comanche call someone who doesn't belong anywhere?" She stirred the pot. "We don't," she said. "Why?" because even ghosts belong to someone. But on the fourth week, a scout arrived. Not to her door, to the ridge. She saw the signal at sunset, a smudge of smoke just above the hills. Quick, sharp, not accidental. Toma's stomach turned cold. Not because she didn't understand the language, but because she did. It wasn't her people. Not Comanche, not Apache either. This was military, U.S. cavalry, and they were looking for something, or someone. She didn't tell the boy that night, just sharpened her knives slower than usual. The next morning, she gave him a task. Go to the river bend. Check the traps. I thought we checked them yesterday. Check again. He squinted. You okay? She didn't answer, just handed him a bundle of sage. Burn this if you see men in uniform. He took it without a word, but he saw her eyes and knew. They came by midday. 7 riders, gray-blue coats, sun-bleached and dust-covered. Not loud, not yelling, just quiet, official, serious. Toma stood in the doorway, braids wrapped tight, bow slung behind her. The one in front had officer's stripes. Thin face, pale mustache. Afternoon, he said politely. We're searching for an escaped prisoner. Young, white, mixed blood, possibly. Toma didn't answer. He glanced toward the hut, then back to her. He's dangerous. Attacked a rancher. Stole from a Union patrol. Possibly unstable. Still, she didn't blink. Name? She asked. The officer shifted. No legal name. Might be going by Jesse. Or Eli. Or nothing at all. She crossed her arms. Lots of boys in the world without names. Not like this one. He's a threat. To you. To law. She smiled, but it didn't touch her eyes. Law has sharp teeth when it's afraid. The officer stepped down. Walked slow. Deliberate. This boy, he killed a man. Took his horse. Shot a corporal. He shoot the corporal before or after they tied him to a fence? That stopped him. He looked at her. What did you say? I said, she repeated. Maybe ask who the law protects before you call someone dangerous. The officer's hand rested on the butt of his pistol. You're harboring a criminal. No, she said. I'm protecting a boy who was left for buzzards, and who now feeds himself and asks good questions. He glanced over his shoulder at his men, then back at her. He's not your people. She didn't blink. He is now. They didn't leave. Not right away. They waited on the ridge. 2 days. Watching. Trying to flush the boy out. But he didn't return to the hut. He didn't need to. Toma had taught him well. He moved through the brush like shadow. Slept beneath pine. Ate sparingly. He watched their campfires from the trees and never made a sound. He could have run. But he didn't. Not until Toma sent smoke up into the sky, 3 short puffs, followed by 2 long ones. A message. Come. Quietly. No weapons. He waited until the moon was high, then came to her. The men were asleep on the ridge, or so they thought. But the boy crawled low, ducked beneath scrub and stone, and poured crushed yarrow into their coffee satchel while they snored. When morning came, they drank it without question. Within the hour, their bellies turned. By noon, they were doubled over behind trees and crawling in the grass. Toma stood in front of her hut, the boy beside her. Time to leave, she said. He didn't argue. They rode east, not fast, but far, past the hills, beyond the ridge, to a place where no one would look for him again, a place she hadn't been in years, where the bones of her old life still lay beneath the red earth, and where a new one might be built from what was left. That night, as the fire cracked between them, the boy looked at her and said, I would have gone back for you. She stirred the embers. I know. They would have killed me. Maybe. But it wouldn't have mattered. She didn't speak, just looked at him. And in the flicker of firelight, she saw something in him that had nothing to do with blood or birth or name. It was the shape of a soul that had chosen who it wanted to be. They built a lean-to from cottonwood branches and buffalo hide. The boy chopped the poles without being asked. Toma stitched the seams in silence. They spoke less now but understood more. Days passed in rhythm: water, fire, food, rest. Not survival. Living. One morning, the boy returned from the creek holding something carefully in his hand. Turtle. The shell cracked. Found him upside down, he said. Thought maybe he was done for. Toma examined it. He might be. Still flipped him over. She looked at him. Doing what? Turning things upright, even if they're dying. He didn't respond at first. Just set the turtle in the soft grass near the hut and watched it slowly pull its head out. Then said, I think maybe I was waiting for someone to flip me back over too. Toma didn't smile, didn't cry, just stood beside him and said, Then you're not the only one. That night they shared stories. Not the kind meant to impress. The quiet kind, the painful kind. She told him about her sister, the youngest, who used to steal sunflower seeds and hide them in her dress, just so she could plant them secretly behind the lodge. They never grew, she said, but she always planted them anyway. The boy told her about a dog he once loved, a mutt with one eye and a crooked paw. He never left my side, until he did. I guess some things know when you're too broken to be fixed. Toma said, Maybe he knew you were ready to walk alone. The boy stared into the fire. I wasn't. She didn't argue, just handed him a strip of deer meat and let the fire answer for both of them. By the next moon he was stronger, not just in his shoulders, in the way he moved, the way he stood. He no longer flinched at thunder or horses' hoofs in the distance. His hands had stopped shaking when he carved wood, and his eyes now met hers without apology. One evening, she handed him a small bundle wrapped in hide. Inside, a beaded necklace, old, simple, the color of dusk and river stones. I made it for my brother, she said, before the raids. He never came back. The boy looked up, startled. I can't take this. You're not taking it, she said. You're wearing it, until you know your name. He opened his mouth, then closed it, carefully tied the string around his neck with fingers that didn't shake. What did you call him? My brother. She nodded. He swallowed. His name was Sadake. What's it mean? She stared into the trees a long moment. One who listens before speaking. The boy nodded, tugged the necklace gently into place. Seems like a good thing to be. She didn't say it, but she thought it. So do you. A week later, he brought her a deer. Small, clean shot. He dropped it gently at her feet and waited for her to speak. She didn't. She just knelt, examined the entry wound, ran her fingers along the fur. Well, he was grinning, proud. Was that lucky? He asked. Toma looked up. No. He blinked. No, that wasn't lucky, she said. That was earned. And before he could ask what she meant, she stood and walked into the hut. When she came back out, she held something in her hands. A scrap of old hide. Dark. Worn. On it, for symbols stitched in deep red thread. He looked down at it. What is it? Your name. He blinked. You said you'd tell me when I earned it. I did. So what is it? She held it up so he could see the marks. They say Noka. He furrowed his brow. What's that mean? She didn't smile, didn't blink, just said, It means, he who chooses where he belongs. He stared at the hide, ran his thumb over the stitching, let the name sit in his mouth a while, then whispered it. Noka. And this time he smiled. Not proud, not nervous, just whole. They never returned to the old hut, never spoke of the fence. Not because they were running, but because Noka had stopped being a boy tied down by the past. And Toma, the woman with no tribe left to call her own, had stopped waiting for the world to take from her again. They traveled light, trapped for fur, gathered roots, moved camp by season. Sometimes they passed near settlements. Other times, they vanished into the folds of the land so deeply even the wind forgot their names. But in every valley, every ridge, every clearing where they paused, Noka carved a single mark in the bark of a tree, a circle with a line through it. What does it mean? Toma asked once. It means someone lived here who wasn't meant to die in silence. She nodded, never questioned it again. Years passed. Noka grew into a man, shoulders like stone, voice low and steady. But he never lost the gentleness in his eyes or the patience in his hands. He still crouched to feed birds from his palm, still stitched leather with care, still listened before speaking. One spring, while fishing, he met a girl by the water, Kiowa, maybe. Her hair was in knots and her voice was sharp, but she laughed at his quiet jokes and came back the next day with berries and questions. 3 months later, she followed him to the cedar grove he called home. Toma watched them from a distance, didn't say a word, but that night she sang. Soft, old, a melody Noka had never heard from her before. When he asked what it meant, she said, "It's a song for welcoming someone who never expected to be welcomed." He didn't need to ask if she meant him or the girl. He knew the answer was both. Toma's hair turned white. Her steps slowed. She spoke less. But when she did, it was always with precision, like the final strokes on a painting already complete. One evening, as orange firelight licked the walls of their lodge, she called Noka to her side. "I'm ready to go," she said. He swallowed. "Where?" She smiled. "Now fragile. Now small. To wherever the buffalo go when they're no longer hunted." He blinked away tears. "Ta!" She raised a hand. "Don't name it. Just hold my hand. That's enough." He did, all through the night. And when the sun rose, he kissed her forehead. She didn't breathe again, but her fingers were still warm. They buried her beneath a cliff of red rock, where the canyon sang in the mornings and the grass swayed like river reeds. He placed the hide with her, the one she'd stitched his name into, then carved a stone to mark her place. It didn't say her name, didn't say Comanche or mother or warrior. It simply said, "She gave me back to myself." Years later, folks in small towns whispered of a half-wild man in the hills, a quiet one, strong, who helped with broken wagons and sick animals and found children who wandered too far into the woods. Some called him strange. Some said he was a ghost. But others, those who had sat near his fire, eaten his stew, heard his quiet stories, said, "No, he's not a ghost. Just a boy someone once tied to a fence, until someone better gave him a name."